celebrate the Creator for the resources and knowledge that consistently optimize His gift of natural healing in our bodies. We thank our hosts at the All Nations Fellowship Seventh-day Adventist Church in partnership with Community Outreach Incorporated for providing this one-of-a-kind opportunity that helps us all live healthier tomorrow than we are today, every single day. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's your Natural Health Meetup presenting team for this life-enhancing edition.
Ladies and gentlemen, so thankful for your presence here this evening. I'd like to welcome you officially. A couple of things I'd like to say in the welcome. It is a joy, a tremendous joy to have an audience that's interested in being healthier. And this is a challenge as well as the welcome. All right? It's a challenge as well as the welcome. It's someone like all of you here who are interested in being healthier tomorrow than you were today, every single day. How about that for a challenge and a community that's working not just to be barely healthy, but to be optimally healthy? And so we want to thank you all for coming out. This is the Natural Health Enthusiast Group. And we are a faith-based group, as you heard in the introduction. And I hope you could hear that. It was a little soft on my end, and I'm in a location that is a little bit different today. But we do have a faith-based foundation. And so we start off our time with prayer. And we're just so thankful to the God that we believe in, that He is able to provide all of these wonderful healing modalities for our benefit. And so this evening, we have one of our longtime, in fact,
Father God, can you hear me, Dale?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead, please, Lovina.
Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for Brother Dale and everybody else who contributes to these meetings to bring us health and healing messages and encourage us to pursue life that you gave us in the beginning of creation. Please work in our hearts, not just to learn, but also to apply in our lives and do share with others these messages. Thank you for being a loving God and for protecting us from evil. Thank you for Jesus, who gave His life for us so we can be with you eternally. We love you and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so very much. That was wonderful. And let me go back here now. And at this time, we're going to review our agenda for the evening so that everybody knows what we're expecting for today. And we also have a disclaimer and so on, just that so that everybody knows who we are, why we're here, and what we're actually sharing with you. So our agenda today is going to be very simple, except that we have two new items on the agenda. So immediately after this, the disclaimers today, you are going to be encouraged to get into the chat window to respond to 3 questions. So I'm going to ask you to get your fingers ready. I want you to get those, the chat button, your mouse, your touchpad, whatever it is you need to get to that chat button on your Zoom, because I'd like you to put some numbers and words and things that we're going to encourage you to put in there. And we're going to call that the appetizer minute. That's going to be a new experience that we're going to have in our group today at our Natural Health Learn and Share Meetup. So for our agenda today, after our appetizer minute, we are going to then move right on into the speaker's introduction, and that will be given by Dr. Gideon Lewis. And then Dr. Ronald Lynch is going to be our keynote speaker this evening. He's going to take us on a journey that you will not believe and we have some options to be healthier in all of that. I would also like you to know that we will have a question and answer. If you would like to put your questions in the chat window during the presentation, that is totally acceptable. Dr. Danny Frederick is going to be monitoring that for us. And if you have any questions, they will be answered at the end. I know that Dr. Lynch is an interactive presenter, and so he will certainly be able to entertain questions, and if something is relevant, we'll certainly get them answered even during the presentation. Would you also know that we'll have a quick video break just to reintroduce who we are and how to stay connected with us? And then we'll be wrapping it up with a thank you, closing comments. And this evening, we're going to be having an after discussion. It's the backyard moment, the backyard barbecue, if you will, just for 15 minutes. Health tips, reactions, responses to the presentation tonight, things that you learned. And Dr. Danny will tell us a little bit more about that and how that's going to be set up. So I'm going to sharing my screen here and just a little bit more information on who we are. We're the Natural Health Enthusiasts. And what we produce is we consider it to be an outreach ministry. And this is designed for our members and for natural health enthusiasts all over the world. We also have do this every single month, the second Tuesday of the month, and wanting to be sure that you put that on your calendar. It's going to be the same link for Zoom. Just come on here, put it on your calendar, because it's going to be a life-enhancing experience every single time. And our vision is through the practice of the 8 laws of health, integrated with evidence-based research, that we see a world empowered by Christ's love that is passionately seeking to be its healthiest in body, mind, and soul. And so as you join us, you will know where we're going. And these is some members of our team. I'd like you to say a special prayer for Dr. Michael Junta. He's currently hospitalized, had a serious fall just a few days ago, and is in the hospital here in the Illinois area for surgery. So please say a prayer for him. And all of our team is here. Most of us are here already. And then, of course, our disclaimer, please. Nothing that we share here today is to be considered medical advice, medical treatment, or even just a diagnosis. All right, so please allow us to share the information. Do your own research. Speak with a medical practitioner that's qualified to answer your questions. And that way you will get the proper care that you deserve. And at this time, I'd like to go on, and our questions are going to be displayed on the screen. I'm going to stop sharing what I'm sharing here, and I will also want you to look at the screen. You're going to realize that on the screen, it's set up with questions, your chat. Get in the chat window and let's answer these questions so that you can indeed see what this appetizer minute is all about. Are you ready? Barry, can you share those questions for us? Okay, so he is sharing this, but it's not showing up in the window, at least not in mine. Let's see if I do.
I do see the question on a scale of 1 to 5. How much do you know about your health heritage?
Okay, all right. So can everybody see that? Because I'm seeing it now, but it's very small. And I was hoping that it would be a larger screen. But yes, so the question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being you know a whole lot about your health heritage. What do you know about your health heritage? Please put that in the chat right now. I want to get some responses in the chat window. Let us hear. 5, okay. All right, so we have some people that know a lot about their health heritage. Okay, we got a 3, we got a 5. Okay, I'm going to go with a 4. All right, fantastic. We're getting
It's
some
a great
feedback.
question. What is health heritage?
What is health heritage, right? Yeah, and that's a good question to be asked as well. Yeah, health heritage is more than the genes, right? Yeah. And Dr. Lynch is going to give us some some information tonight that may be a surprise to many of us. And so we'd like to go to the next question at this time. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat these numbers that indicate how much you feel comfortable with your health heritage. And our next question says, name 3 things that if you do them consistently, that it will positively impact your life in the next 3 months. Come on now, folks. Yeah, sleep, water, and pray. All right. Fantastic. 3 things that you know you should do or are doing that will help you to be healthier in the next 3 months. 3 new habits, if you will. Eat like a true vegan. Okay. Like a true vegan. Okay, so we have some false ones out there. Okay, water, exercise, and diet. Rest, pray, and sleep. I love those responses. That's amazing. We have people, these people know exactly what they want to do. Oh my goodness. Exercise, prayer, speak life. I love that one too. Yes, thank you, Janine. Wow, that's fantastic. All right, thank you so much for sharing those. And we have one more question. Can you believe it? Just one more question. And this is getting much closer to our topic this evening. And the next question says, what industrial or household and or personal care products must we avoid to minimize the burden of toxins in my body? What must we avoid? And what do you know about that already? Industrial, household, personal care products that we must avoid to minimize the burden of toxins in our bodies. Plastics, yep, absolutely. Oh, I see a name there. Pesticides, absolutely. We know about these things, right? And avoiding them can be so challenging. We do want to give you some answers tonight. Thank you so much. And you know, personal care products are on that list as well. And I want you to think about your shampoos. I want you to think about your cosmetics. I want you to think about, you know, the things that you have in your home that you are actually putting onto your body. And so these are things that we want you also to be aware of. So thank you, folks. That was our appetizer minute. I hope you enjoyed that. And thank you so much for sharing. We have at this time a tremendous opportunity to learn just a little bit more about our speaker tonight. And Dr. Gideon Lewis is one of our planning members. And he was the one responsible for negotiating this with Dr. Lynch. Dr. Gideon, are you in the house, sir?
I am in the house.
Wonderful. Okay. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Dale. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's again a pleasure to introduce the speaker tonight. It so happened that a few weeks ago, I met with Dr. Lynch after church, and he shared with me some of his newfound information about toxins. And I was very enthralled by what he had to say. So I asked him if he'd be a speaker for this meeting tonight. And he was very willing to do so. So it's really a pleasure to have you, Dr. Lynch. Dr. Lynch actually hails from a Jamaican background and grew up in Brooklyn, New York. He graduated from Oakwood College, received a master's in physiology from Howard University, and graduated from the University of Maryland Medical School. He did a family practice residency at Florida Hospital, now Advent Health, And so I've known him for a number of years. He has served the Central Florida area doing family medicine for over 25 years, doing medicine and environmental health before retiring. Interestingly, he's very interested in public health, and he's doing a master's degree at the University of Florida, and he's completing a master's in public health soon. Actually, he told me he got 2 A's and a B on his last test. He actually loves to play tennis, table tennis, and martial arts. He's married. He has 3 grown children, one of which graduated from Andrews University, and is now a doctor of audiology, Judith Santiange. He's currently exploring nanotechnology and the hazards of radio frequency radiation. I'm happy to present to you a friend and colleague, Dr. Ronald Lynch.
Well, let me see if I can get my share screen up. Yes, good evening, everyone. I am humbled to be here. I want to give thanks to Dr. Gideon Lewis for his kind introduction and for his invitation to me, as well as to, if I may, Dale, call you Professor Campbell. Would you want to lock me up if I say that? And Dale informed me that he is not part of that singing group from 30, 40 years ago called The Fifth Dimension, but he has a ministry and a purpose that is in the fifth dimension. And he'll probably tell you more about that life optimization. But nonetheless, we're all here tonight, I suspect, for the same reason, that we want to know how we can enjoy life and optimal health simultaneously. We know that health represents a balance between the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and I'm going to make a case for the environmental health as well. And ideally, we want to enjoy a long life of quality and done as naturally as possible. That's what I suspect that we're all here for tonight. And with that, I'm going to look to the right, and I don't want to forget this very important point, that if it was not for the goodness and the mercies of God, none of us would enjoy anything close to good health, great health, or optimal health. So we just have to thank God for his mercies unto us. You can see on this first slide a picture, a diagram, as it were, of Mother Earth. And you can see that Mother Earth has a baby. And of course, the question is, are we killing Mother Earth? Are we killing Mother Nature? And unfortunately, Mother Nature's blood has become contaminated and polluted, and she is no longer able to nourish this baby, because even the breast milk, we find, has been contaminated. And I wrote an article about that over 10 years ago. You would be shocked to know the contents of breast milk. Having said that, I'm not recommending that anybody even think about not breastfeeding their baby. But tonight, there are certain goals that I'd like to get over to all of us. And that is, I want everyone to understand the term, the body burden. By the time we get through, you should understand, what does body burden really mean? And we receive a body burden from what we call anthropogenic sources. And that's a big word to say. It's man-made. This is not anything that God brought to us. We brought this to ourselves. I also want you to understand the damage that endocrine disrupting chemicals are causing in terms of our sickness and death, and another way to express that is morbidity and mortality. And also, I'm going to bring something controversial to you, but could it be that these endocrine disrupting chemicals, which alter our hormonal system, could they be contributing to an alteration of the reproductive system of animals and also of man? And so we're gonna see how certain chemicals can cause a demasculinization of males and also feminization of males. And then lastly, I want to introduce the concept known as the One Health concept, which will become clear to you very shortly. All right, we're going to start out by talking about the body burden. And this was a study that I became aware of probably about 20 years ago. And it was the collaboration of the Environmental Working Group, along with a group called Commonweal, and also the Red Cross. And they spent $10,000 per baby to study 10 babies. And they wanted the babies right out of the womb. These babies had never been out of the hospital. And we always thought that the placenta would be a filter that would appropriately screen out any damage to our unborn infants. And unfortunately, that is not the case, because what they found on these $10,000 a piece studies was on an average of 287 chemicals in every baby that they checked. Now, subsequent to 2004, they have repeated this study in Latino babies and African American babies and also Asian Pacific. The first 10 were Caucasian babies, and they found pesticides, they found consumer product ingredients, waste from burning coal, gasoline, and from garbage on the very first day of life. Now, you can probably see that where is this toxicity coming from if it's introduced into this newborn baby? Well, wouldn't you know, it's coming from mommy. Mommy is toxic, and the womb may not be so hospitable. Now, according to the CDC, they say that a majority of pregnant women's blood have toxic chemicals in it. And they also say that this is unacceptable. And so we ought to pass the Safe Chemicals Act. There is a graph in the center that identifies the fact that the United States has the highest neonatal and post-neonatal mortality rate in the world. In other words, we have about 5.8 deaths per 1,000 live births. And that is much steeper, much more than in Japan, for example, that has 1.1. And so we could argue, we could say, well, how is it that the richest country in the world would have the worst mortality in the world? This is rather shameful. There's a diagram to the right that is pointing to lots of the industrial, commercial, residential waste, which somehow winds up in mom's body and ultimately shows up in the bloodstream of these newborn babies. So this body burden study, which was identified as the pollution in newborns, was a benchmark investigation, very serious investigation that identified that out of that 287 chemicals, 180 of them were known to be carcinogenic, capable of causing cancer. 217 of the 287 were toxic to the brain and to the nervous system. And 208 of those chemicals would cause abnormal development and perhaps birth defects. So these are very serious accusations of chemicals that are found on the first day of birth. And if you're thinking, if you wonder if your grandchild was among, or if you've had a relative born within the last 20 or 30 years, they would fall into the same statistical numbers as what we're seeing right here. Now, it is very significant to me, hopefully to you, that cancer is the #1 cause of death in terms of a disease among children. Now that sounds very counterintuitive to me, because I'm thinking grandpa, grandma should be dying of cancer, but how is it that cancer would be the #1 cause of death? Well, I just got through telling you that there was no less than 180 chemicals that were identified as carcinogenic, and we're only going to have time to cover maybe 4 or 5 different categories of groups, but most of them will all be under the heading of endocrine disrupting chemicals. So this first one, which are known as perfluorinated chemicals, or PFCs, these include things like Teflon, the Teflon pots that we highly regard because of their no-stick capabilities. Scotchgard had lots of products out there, fabric and carpet protectors, food wrappings also, which are made of plastics, are another source of these PFCs. And these PFCs get into the body and they can't get out. They hide in the adipose tissue, and we don't have the enzymatic capability of breaking them down. So they lodge and they stay. And you see here, these PFCs are linked to cancer and to birth defects. We also see here at the bottom, these organochlorine molecules. And these organochlorine molecules, such as DDT, for example, this was banned some 30 or 40 years ago, but it lingers in our tissues, it lingers in the environment, it accumulates up the food chain, it causes not only cancer, but it damages our reproductive systems as well. So this is a class of pesticides known as organochlorines, and they very commonly show up in breast tissue. As you can see to the right, over the last 20 to 30 years, there has been a tremendous increase in autism, male birth defects, specifically something known as hypospadias, where the urine does not come out through the tip of the penis or the urethra. It comes out in the middle of the shaft of the penis, and that requires a significant operation for a little baby boy. And this is becoming very common. Childhood asthma, leukemia has gone up tremendously, as has childhood brain cancer. And we also note that sperm counts have been going down in man. Birth defects are happening in a significant way. So we are in a boatload of problems, but it is no wonder that our babies are having a time, and that children are suffering some of the chronic illnesses that they should not be suffering. One of the compounds that we're going to talk about is known as atrazine, and atrazine is an herbicide that's the second most commonly used pesticide in this country. And it's of interest to me that where they make this, where this comes from in Europe, in the European Union, they have banned atrazine, but the United States has embraced it. And we use no less than 60 to 80 pounds of atrazine applied on a yearly basis. Most of it goes to California, probably Florida, but the Midwestern part of the country gets a good chunk of it. And the major issue with it is its capability of converting testosterone into estrogens. And so I want you all to listen to a brief presentation by Dr. Tyrone Hayes, who I had the privilege of being on a platform with some years back. I may stop and interrupt to clarify something that he is saying, but you're going to see here the first evidence of how endocrine disruptors can demasculinize and feminize male gonads in a frog.
I like solving the puzzle. I like the CSI. I also like frogs, and so I also feel a real drive to help understand how pesticides and other chemicals are affecting amphibian populations.
Hayes and his students have been looking for clues in the Salinas Valley.
50% of the U.S.'s agricultural products come out of California. And something like 85% of the country's lettuce comes out of Salinas, 90% of the almonds. It's called the salad bowl of America. California uses more pesticides than any other state. The second biggest is Florida. Things like chlorpicrin is used out here on the strawberries. Chlorpicrin is a nerve gas. These are guys who are applying it, they're out there picking it. Methyl bromide, it's a fumigant, something you pump into the soil. What are some of the other big ones, you guys? Atrazine. This will all end up in the river that we're working in here. It might look like we're out in the bush somewhere, but 15 feet on either side, we're surrounded by agriculture, and the runoff ends up in this river. All of the algae is the result of all the nutrients, because a lot of fertilizers are used in agriculture. And once those fertilizers get into the water, you get these blooms of algae. I wouldn't say it's a sign of a healthy river. This is a site where we typically find compromised immune systems, tadpoles that aren't able to fight off disease. Our data so far suggests that the mixture of pesticides causes an increase in stress hormones, and those stress hormones cause immunosuppression, which leads to the inability to respond to any kind of disease pathogen.
Hayes is testing the effects of chemicals like atrazine, a common herbicide.
We have a whole family of animals where we've eliminated the female chromosome.
Specimen 01.
These animals that we know are genetic males have been exposed to atrazine for their entire life. And many of these genetic males now are turning into females. You can see he's got eggs that kind of look like they're in a sack. These are actually yolked eggs ready to be laid. What's happening is you're skewing sex ratios. You can get genetic bottlenecking, which can cause crashes. And quite frankly, if you're a genetic male, it'd be nice if you developed as a genetic male. And now we have a chemical very common in the environment that's effectively sex reversing animals. I'm going to show you something very amazing, scientifically speaking. The one that's sort of remarkable is this pair. These are both males. The one on the bottom, acting as the female, we affectionately refer to as Darnell. He's a genetic male that not only acts like a female, he lays eggs like a female. She has been exposed to atrazine all of her life. I don't even really know how to reference it. This is Darnell's third clutch. So Darnell has sons and daughters that we've grown up. You can see eggs in the bottom. This is actually her second clutch for today. She has been copulating for getting close to 24 hours now. This is probably one of the most remarkable things I've seen in my work. But I personally have mixed emotions. I'm very excited about the science and trying to understand the mechanism. But on the other hand, I am worried. This is the most common contaminant in ground and surface water and drinking water. And the level of atrazine that it took to make this male turn into a female is 3 times less than what's allowed in our drinking water.
Okay, if you caught what I caught in this in that little video clip, he was incubating toads and infant frogs, tadpoles, with atrazine at 0.1 parts per billion, which is a relatively small amount. And yet he was able to pretty much convert a male into a female to the point that the frog was able to lay eggs. So this is an example of how an endocrine disrupting compound is able to demasculinize and to feminize this male gonad. Now, that study was rather remarkable, and I was really taken aback by that. But I went on to find out from Hayes that these studies have been reproduced in fish, frog, alligators, or reptiles, I should say, and also mammals. On the left, you see the controls. And on the right-hand side, over here at B, you see the atrazine-treated gonads. And so where on the left side, you would see lots of sperm soldiers, you might say. It's empty over here where the atrazine had been involved with their bloodstream. These frogs over here, which were incubated also, you see that there is a sparingness of tissue inside these tubules. And once again, they are devoid of what would normally be found in normal controls. Once again, there's sparsity of the cells that would be producing sperm. Same thing with rats. And so when you begin to notice that an effect is happening across several species, you have to begin to wonder who's next on that list. On the right-hand side, what we also found is that in the fish, this is basically testicular tissue, but where the arrows are pointing, this is where eggs or oocytes are showing up where the testes should be. And there should be no eggs alongside testicular male tissue. Same here with frog tissue. There are eggs or oocytes that are showing up as a result of what atrazine has done. So in this case, on the right-hand side, this represents a feminization of these animal tissues. Same thing with the alligator. There are egg or oocytes, and this is not normal. This is rather abnormal. This is an excellent paper which will go over very strong association, yea, almost causal research demonstrating that we could say that atrazine is actually causing the demasculinization of these animals and feminization. We're going to go further, and I hope you're holding your questions in mind. Here is a picture, once again, of those gay frogs, you might say, that Dr. Hayes spoke of. And these atrazine-exposed males were completely feminized as adults. Now, the problem with atrazine is that, once again, we use 60 to 80 million pounds of this here in the United States. And we particularly use it for corn. It goes on sorghum, and it also goes into sugar cane. But it also happens to be a contaminant in groundwater and hopefully not your drinking water. But believe it or not, small amounts of it are winding up in our drinking water. And what he indicated was 3 times less than what it took to feminize these animals. These males wind up with poor semen quality, impaired fertility, among other things. They found this, once again, in various species along the way. We're going to listen to just a little bit more of what Hayes has to say.
Professor, for most of my life, I felt like just a little boy who likes frogs, who's been trying to answer this question on this book that my mom said she read to me as a baby. I don't remember it, but my mom says it's true. That all changed a few years ago when a chemical company, the largest chemical company in the world, asked me to use my expertise in studying frog hormones to try to understand if the chemical, their #1 selling product, a weed killer, atrazine, if it interfered with their hormones somehow. Long story short, we examined the African clawed frog in my lab, we exposed them to this chemical atrazine, and we showed things like this. And these are testes, and you don't have to have a PhD or be a frog expert to see that there's a difference between the control and the exposed animals. The control testes, if you look at it under the microscope, it's full of sperm soldiers ready to go. The atrazine-treated gonad or testes, the testicular tubules are filled with cellular debris. What's more is if you look at the young developing larvae, you often find sometimes, these are the kidneys, if you're not used to looking at frog gonads, that this is an individual, though, that has testes, then it has more ovaries, then it has another testes, then it has more ovaries. One pair will get you in enough trouble. This situation is certainly not typical of amphibians. There are fish that are naturally hermaphrodites, but not amphibians. We later showed that some of these animals grow up, even though they're genetic males, to become completely functioning reproductive females, even though they were genetic males. We showed that in other species, the gonads look like this. So those are the testes on the top, and all of that junk in the trunk on the bottom, those are all eggs that are bursting through the surface of this male's testes. Now, I showed this to the Environmental Protection Agency because I thought they'd be interested. After all, it's the #1 selling chemical in the world at the time. And they said, well, that's not really an adverse effect that would stimulate us to reassess the chemical. Now, my wife tells me that there is nothing more painful in life than childbirth. I'm gonna have to give her that. But I would guess that a dozen chicken eggs popping out of my testicles would have to be at least in the top 5 most painful experiences. The EPA doesn't think so. I thought more about why this might happen. So for example, if this are your testes, you should make testosterone. Testosterone's a portmanteau. You know, I learned that word at age 49. When you put 2 words together like smoke and fog, you get smog. Twist and jerk, you get twerk. Testosterone means testicular hormone. It's literally the male hormone. But we hypothesized that this atrazine turned on an enzyme aromatase that caused the testosterone to be converted to estrogen. And if you're a male, that means that you're using up your testosterone so you don't make sperm, but it also means that you're making the female hormone when you shouldn't be. So then I started to think, we published that in proceedings in the National Academy of Sciences and Nature, very prestigious journals that'll get you a tenured professorship at a place like UC Berkeley. But journals that, as my mom says, how important can it be? Barnes and Noble's never heard of it. And I started to think, though, about how my work might imply things beyond frogs. So this is a pond in Lake Nabugabo in Uganda, where I started to think that this agricultural runoff might not only affect the frogs and the fish, but also the other animals that are drinking out of the water, including the humans that collect their drinking and cooking water from this same source. Because see, we all make estrogen in the exact same way and use it in the same way. The connection to contaminants in water might not be so obvious for us that this is my village, but things like Erin Brockovich's story and things like Flint, Michigan remind us that we don't necessarily have the sources that we think we have, the clean sources of water. A colleague of mine showed, because I don't study humans, I had to work with other people on this, that if you look at men in Columbia, Missouri, and compare the atrazine in their urine, men who have atrazine in their urine have a low sperm count and can't get their wives pregnant. And by the way, this is the same amount of atrazine, 0.1 parts per billion, that we're reusing to chemically castrate and feminize our frogs. Another colleague showed, and I've mashed the data down now, because these are atrazine levels of men who work in the fields in California, and these are atrazine levels of men who apply atrazine in California. 2,400 parts per billion. They have 24,000 times the atrazine in their urine than we use to chemically castrate frogs and fish. 24,000 times what we know is already having a negative impact on men in Columbia, Missouri. One of these guys could pee in a bucket, and I could dilute it 24,000 times and use the atrazine in their urine to chemically castrate and feminize 24,000 buckets of 30 tadpoles each. Then a little boy who likes frogs learns phrases like environmental justice, because most of these individuals are Latinx or in California, Mexican American. And then I thought about the impact that increasing estrogen would have on humans, because the atrazine has the same effect in human cells. If you take human cancer cells, and we've done some of this work, that don't normally make aromatase for estrogen and give them atrazine, they start making estrogen. Just like we've shown in fish and frogs and rats and reptiles and in birds. What's more is if you look at prostate cancer, there's an 8.4-fold increase in prostate cancer in their factory where they make atrazine in a community that's 80% Black, 80% African American. There's studies showing that there's correlations between atrazine in the drinking water and breast cancer incidence in women in Kentucky. And that's just a correlation, but their own laboratory showed in 1994 that if you give rats atrazine, you increase the incidence of mammary cancer or breast cancer above animals that aren't exposed. This is an interesting problem because breast cancer, the #1 cancer in women, is estrogen dependent. And this aromatase that I've talked about produces the estrogen during breast cancer that stimulates those breast cancers to grow and divide and turn into tumors and spread. In fact, the role of aromatase is so important in breast cancer that the #1 treatment for breast cancer right now is a chemical called letrozole. It works by knocking out aromatase, decreasing estrogen, so that even if you have cancerous cells, they don't grow and turn into a tumor. That drug, though, has to work against the 80 million pounds of atrazine that we're using every year. That's the #1 contaminant of drinking water that does exactly the opposite. I got in trouble because I pointed out that Novartis Oncology in the year 2000 offered treatments for cancer that range from breast cancer So the same company that gave us 80 million pounds of this contaminant associated with breast cancer was also selling a chemical that does the opposite to treat breast cancer. Yeah, they weren't too happy about me pointing that out. I became concerned. I'm just a little boy who likes frogs, but I became concerned because if you look at the top 13 cancers you're going to get in this country, Blacks and African Americans are more likely to get 11 out of the 13 and more likely to die from 13 out of 13. Biology? My colleagues who are experts in cancers tell me that the less than 30% of cancer can be explained by genetics. That means that when the doctor tells you that you're going to get breast cancer, more likely, if your sister, your aunt, or somebody in your family has it, they're not telling you have bad genes necessarily. They're telling you that you've been exposed to the same crap as the rest of your family. Because if you're a minority, if you're an immigrant, if you're first generation, if you're low income, you're more likely to live in and more likely to work in areas where you're exposed to chemicals that we know are associated with adverse health outcomes. What's more is, with the exception of HeLa cells, the cancer cells that we use to study cancer don't come from minorities. So even if we find the cure, only, it may not be applicable to people who would need it the most. So I think what's happened is my interest in this aquatic organism has taught me a great deal about this aquatic organism, because we all start out as aquatic in the amniotic fluid. And these chemicals that I study in my tadpoles can cross the placenta. In fact, we now know that your children will be exposed to over 300 synthetic chemicals before they leave the womb. And most of them, we have no idea what the biological impact is. For atrazine, we do know from rats, which are a proxy for us, that if you give rats atrazine, an EPA lab showed those rats are more likely to have an abortion. Of those rats that don't have an abortion, the sons are born with prostate disease. Of those rats that don't abort, the daughters are born with impaired memory development, such that when they grow up, their offspring experience retarded growth and development. And it was these studies that moved me to most, that made me realize I can't just be a little boy who likes frogs. Because see that rat on the bottom? That rat on the bottom never saw atrazine. The rat on the bottom was affected by atrazine that its grandmother was exposed to. The rat on the bottom never saw atrazine. The rat on the bottom was affected by atrazine that its grandmother was exposed to.
Thank you, Tyrone. So if you had followed what we just saw, which I thought was very dramatic, atrazine is not just having an impact on these animals, frogs and birds and lizards or reptiles, but it's having an impact upon humans. And as you saw, there is reason to believe that atrazine is stimulating more estrogen. This is an exogenous estrogen, which is pushing towards breast cancer. And for the men, it's even related to prostate cancer. And there's just not going to be enough time to go into all of that fundamental information. But look at this, because as a physician over the years, I've had to deal with women with uterine fibroids, with endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, irregular reproductive cycles, and infertility. And each and every one of those is associated with certain endocrine disrupting chemicals. And I bet you that not one of you have had a doctor to take an interest to do a blood test to find out if any of it is showing up in your urine, your blood, or your saliva. Look on the right-hand side, hypospadia, as I made mention of it. This is a incomplete development of the urinary system in males, becoming much more common. Cryptocortism, or undescended testes, infertility, all have very strong associations with chemicals. How many of our urologists are paying any attention to draw a blood test or do a urine specimen on these commonly found environmental chemicals? Just a question. I'm just saying. And so on the women's side, this actually represents what I would call estrogen dominance. If a woman has too much estrogen, and it's not because her body is producing too much bad estrogen. These are estrogens that are coming from the outside, and they are invading the system by their chemical presence, which is able to bind to the receptors and to cause confusion at that receptor, maybe to block the normal function or to stimulate it in some unusual way. So what we've got to do is to pay more attention to these endocrine disrupting chemicals, which may come in the form of lipsticks and lotions and creams that we may be using, and they are absolutely contributing to neurobehavioral disorders. They may cause abnormalities with thyroid hormones, with obesity. There's a new word I want to give you called diabesity, metabolic syndrome, polycystic ovarian, irregular menstrual cycle, cancer of the breast or uterus, cervix, the prostate cancer, gynecomastia. When these things happen, our physicians are going to have to get to the point, and medical personnel, of wanting to correlate these things with the blood, urine, or other tissues along with these symptoms. But we're not paying attention to that so far. Hopefully it'll happen somewhere in the next 10 years that we will take that interest as medical professionals. I want you to look at this slide because I think a lot of people are somewhat confused about where and how do pollutants get into their bodies. And you can see here that there are several different sources. You got air pollution and smog and smoke producing acid rain. So a lot of these things will wind up in the soil, whether that be from landfills, whether it be from leaking gas tanks or from chlorine or fluorides in the municipal treatments, the copper or the lead pipes, the septic situations, fertilizers or pesticides. They ultimately get into the water in very small amounts. And that's why I'm going to give you an assignment. Your assignment, if you choose to accept it, is to check where does your drinking water come from? And look at one of the evaluations and one of the assessments. You need to know where your water comes from and what's really in your water. Because you shower in that water, you cook with that water sometimes. Of course, it should be filtered water without a doubt. How does your city manage your solid waste? Is it being incinerated, in which case it may still wind up in the air? Is it being recycled? Is it composting? What does your community do with medical waste, with hazardous waste, with radioactive waste? We can't ship this stuff off the planet to Mars, so invariably, it's still going to wind up being some form or fashion on planet Earth in the air, the water, or the soil. This CAFO represents concentrated animal feeding operations, and this is where they may have hundreds of cows or pigs or other chickens that grow together, and they produce lots of manure. They produce lots of conditions that once again gets into our groundwater and becomes a problem. But none of this is really sustainable, perhaps, except for the composting and maybe some of the recycling. But these are your assignments to find out how your city deals with solid waste and to check your water supply and how clean or how unclean your water is. This pile on the left represents a room full of plastic. And if some of you have been paying attention, you know that there is so much plastic that has gotten into the ocean that you could practically have a little island in the ocean, and it moves around. It's quite a significant amount of plastic. And guess what? This room represents not only a lot of mess, but this room is full of endocrine disrupting components. So all plastic that you use is another endocrine disruptor, which really begs a case for why we need to use a more durable plastic, which we carry our water in, instead of the plastic water bottles, which are leaching these endocrine disrupting chemicals right into our system. The graph on the right demonstrates that way back in 1960, we were all each responsible for perhaps 2.6 pounds of trash, of garbage per day. But as you get closer to 2018, we're now close to 5 pounds of garbage per day per person. And if you begin to take note of what you do with all of the garbage that you have your hands on, you're probably not far away from this 5 pounds per day. And so we're running out of places to put our garbage, but we love to accumulate things. We want to buy more things, and Amazon has made it so easy to get some more stuff, but we should have gone into the storage business, because that's what you see around town. Lots of storage units, because we don't have enough place to put stuff. And what are we going to do? How are we disposing of stuff that is going to wind up getting into our food, air, water, soil in some form or fashion, and then into our bodies? Here we're going to talk about what we refer to as the One Health concept. And this One Health concept says that human health, animal health, and the health of the environment can't really be separated. We're all part of one system. And as you look here to the left, you see that these red colors on planet Earth represent that the globe is warming. This is climate change. This means that the seas are warmer, the ice caps are melting. We got more hurricanes, we got more weather, some bizarre weather things that have happened just within the last several weeks. We've had several people to die from weather changes. So we have got to start having medical doctors studying with veterinarians and with the wildlife, because we're all part of one unit. And this is the new health concept, that everybody has a right to environmental protection. Don't you think having environmental rights is something that we should push for, just like we would push for human rights? I think so. And even though none of us really want to get political, in order to change what is happening around us, we are going to have to let our voices be heard in order for our environment to be clean, because our cellular environment could never be any cleaner than the outside environment. This is a reminder that little babies trying to develop, and all of us want to have a perfect baby or perfect grandbaby, but when you have things that could damage the liver, the kidneys, the gastrointestinal system, the nervous system, the lung system, the cardiovascular system, we are going to have babies that are going to be born with more defects, and it's just not going to be sustainable. So we have got to do something to clean up this womb and get mom in a better state. And my suggestion may be that mothers may have to detox, mothers-to-be may have to detox before having a baby. There are a lot of risks that go into breast cancer. But on the list, of course, are the endocrine disruptors. There are certain industrial chemicals, but it's staying up late at night, because if you stay up late at night, nurses have a higher rate of breast cancer because they're not getting adequate amounts of melatonin, for example. Which is more than just something for sleep. Of course, diet, alcohol, exercise also are factored in here, as well as the BRCA1 and BRCA2. So we're not going to leave out genetics, but genetics is playing a much smaller role. But these endocrine disrupting chemicals play a significant role. And when surgeons have ever done biopsies, every breast tissue that has been submitted for toxicological study have wound up finding chemicals that fall in the category of endocrine disruptors that have lodged in the ducts and the tubules of that breast tissue, which is why women who never breastfeed, never go through lactation, will have a higher risk of breast cancer, breast problems. By the way, it was just today, I don't know if any of you noticed, but they decided that screening for breast cancer was going to now be dropped down to 40 years of age. This is a good start, but I have seen, as you all have seen, 30-year-old Black females that are having breast cancer at earlier ages. And I'm pushing for the use of thermography, which is a radioactive way of evaluating the breast, and that could be used in a complementary way. But we have to start screening our young ladies. Black women, by the way, have a 40% higher chance of dying of breast cancer than their white counterpart. 40% increase in death compared to the Caucasian females. When you consider how many cancers involve hormones such as prostate, breast, uterine, or other reproductive tissues, it may not be surprising that estrogenic and other hormone active chemicals such as BPA or phthalates and certain pesticides are contributing to carcinogenic risks. So unfortunately or fortunately, we're going to have to become more savvy when it comes on to looking and reading labels. And those of you who are not consuming organic foods, well, they're often being sprayed with certain kinds of pesticides unbeknownst to you that are getting inside your system from ingestion. So you've got to be more, we all have to be more circumspect as to where are our fruits and vegetables coming from. Are they being treated with man-made or anthropogenic chemicals, or are they fertilized in more natural ways? And so all these industrial wastes somehow are winding up in the womb, and they're not really giving our children and our grandchildren, our little nephews and nieces, a proper chance to have a healthy development. So you can pronounce that they should follow the New Start program and eat all the fruits and vegetables and get all the exercise, drink water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, trusting in God. But what are we going to do about this goop? How are we going to get this out of the system? How are we going to exercise this out of the system? And as I said in the first slide, if it was not for the goodness and the mercies of God, none of us would be able to enjoy decent health. Fortunately, God has given us some great adaptability. He has given us individual metabolic, physiologic skill to somehow dodge and weave. And so some of us are close to 70, maybe past 70, maybe getting on to 75. And it's just a miracle that we have not been shut down earlier because of all of these hazards that we are currently exposed to. Some of these endocrine disrupting chemicals also fall into the category of being obesogens, which means it makes it more difficult for some of us to lose weight. Have some of you realized how difficult it is to lose weight? You've gone through all of the proper advice and you're still not able to lose weight. Well, it's because some of those same compounds are causing your system to hold on to its protection, as it were. It could be that adipose tissue is a form of protection, but certainly it also is where it harbors toxicity. Some of these endocrine disrupting chemicals, we actually give it to our children. They're in the form of plastic toys. If you can think of how many toys your grandkids and your nephews, your nieces, your children have played with, and that's a great source because they love to suck on that stuff. The drinking bottles we talked about, which may have BPA, it may have phthalates or plasticizers. House dust may come from the flame retardants on your furniture or from your electronics. And should those things catch on fire, the flame retardants are supposed to keep the flames down, but it's getting into our bodies. PFAS, I had mentioned some perfluorinated chemicals earlier. Certain building materials have it. PVC pipe, we think PVC pipe is wonderful, but if PVC catches on fire, you are going to die of the impact that it has on your lungs. A lot of the fragrances that we think, oh, that's such a beautiful smell, have no idea what it is, but they could be harming us. Food packaging, the cash register receipts, and right out of our personal care products have parabens and phthalates and triclosan. This is even hand sanitizer. And so in the men, it may cause low sperm count, prostate cancer, infertility, the obesity, the diabetes, the thyroid challenges, the breast cancer, developmental dysfunction. The child is going to suffer some developmental problems as well. So this seems to be the key enzymatic step that is producing some problems. For whatever reason, many of these exogenous chemicals, we're calling EDCs or endocrine disrupting chemicals, they somehow are able to stimulate this enzyme. And when that happens, too much estradiol or estrogen develops. This estrogen will proliferate and cause breast cancer, but I came to find out that too much estrogen also will push towards prostate cancer. Estradiol will shut down LH, or luteinizing hormone. And if the men don't have luteinizing hormone, you can't produce testosterone, or you produce inadequate amounts of it. So we have got to find ways of blocking this aromatase, and that would be by using an aromatase inhibitor. And if you caught what Tyrone said earlier, the company that produces atrazine is now producing letrozole, which is an aromatase inhibitor. So that company is having its cake and eating it too. If you have no testosterone, men, you are not the man that you used to be. And this is an issue because many of us are seeing a phenomenon of transgenderism and homosexuality, which may have been very uncommon 20 or 30 years ago, but it is extremely common now. And I had to wonder to myself, now I'm not trying to insinuate to you, but I had to wonder to myself, is there anything in the water? Is there anything in the water that could explain why reproductive system problems and hormonal changes during gestation could be having an impact on humans as it is on mammals and fish and frogs and birds? You get my drift? And so we're back to paying attention to our source of water, because this is a very, very important a place where things wind up getting back in our bodies, whether it's through the rain, whether it's through evaporated smog. But do check up on your water source and how your city handles its waste, because it will give you an education and it will tell you about sustainability. We have got to figure out better ways of managing life here on planet Earth. And so on the left here, you see environmental justice for all, and that we have a right to not only health, but we have a right to a healthy planet. Environmental racism refers to communities of color being negatively affected by policies on pollution, housing, and more. Disadvantaged Black communities often have disproportionately higher rates of cancer. Do you know that there are places called Superfunds scattered around the country where there's lots of toxicity, and they hide it by calling it a Superfund? But I did a presentation many years ago, the same program that Tyrone Hayes was on, and I said, if you want to get pancreatic cancer, this is the zip code you need to go to. If you want to get prostate cancer, this is where you need to live. Many of those places were down in Louisiana, which they call that Cancer Alley. But anywhere you have industrial companies and large businesses that are disposing of their effluent and water supplies, you are going to have a problem. More than a century of housing and financial discrimination have helped to create this problem, you might say, of environmental racism. And so activists are working to get environmental justice for those that are affected. And so in addition to recommending to your friends, your clients, your family members that they eat more fruits and vegetables and drink more clean water, more distilled water, you've got to make sure that they are living in clean neighborhoods. You've got to make sure that they're well educated so that they can provide a good employment where they can have access to health care, because the social determinants of health may be just as important as any 8 natural remedies that we have outside of trusting in God. So get your brain wrapped around what personal care products do you use. Check all your cosmetics. Look out for phthalates, among other things. Your drinking water. You want to make sure that your drinking water has been filtered. You want the best filtering process because water is 75 to 80% of your body. Canned foods contain BPA, and it's in the lining of those canned products. That's where you find the BPA. Make sure that you're getting organically grown foods because industrial runoff will ensure that pesticides and herbicides may actually be on your food. Kitchen products like the non-stick cookware, try to avoid those because it has the PFAS and also BPA. And some of your cleaning products, you'll have to pay more attention to that as well. We can say that because what we want to do is to have more aromatase inhibiting foods, you want to really be strong on your organic cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts and cabbage, even kale. Your healthy, fat-rich foods such as coconut oil, avocados, your nuts and seeds. These are always going to be of some value in trying to inhibit that conversion of testosterone going into estrogen. Olive oil and olives. If you're going to have meat, at the very least, they should be grass-fed beef, wild-caught salmon, or organic poultry, but it's getting harder and harder to find clean animal foods anywhere. These allium products, such as garlic, onions, chives, scallions, and leeks, will improve the levels of your glutathione, which is a very important antioxidant that your liver and other cells produce, which will facilitate and help metabolize certain poisons out of your system. So there are some things that we can do. And finally, there are certain supplements. There's one known as DIM. I really don't know anything about this particular brand, but I wanted you to know that there really are items that can be used to minimize the estrogen dominance and minimize the conversion of that testosterone going into estrogen, and that often feature cruciferous vegetables. And so men, I picked on the women quite a bit, but some of our men are having more depression. They're having decreased muscle mass, low libido. They're having erection problems, decreased athletic performance. You see the abdominal fat, the man boobs or gynecomastia, constant fatigue, lack of focus. And this is really maybe closer to where we ought to be. And it would not be an unreasonable suggestion, men, to ask your doctors to test your levels of not only your total testosterone, but the free levels of testosterone. Because when testosterone is in the mix, you are going to feel better. You'll have better mental focus, an elevated mood. Your confidence will be good. You will have decreased body fat, and everything else will stand up on its own. So, recommendation to have your doctor to check you out. This is another holistic aromatase inhibitor known as myomin that I have done some research on, but not selling anything. I have nothing to sell. You'll have to do your own research and speak with your own health providers. I am finished with my presentation, but on another occasion would love to share with you the damage that electromagnetic radiation is doing to us in the form of radio frequency radiation, and also the proliferation of nanotechnology. It's got benefits, but they have not been tested in terms of their safety. And so that concludes my presentation, and I'm going to open the floor to whatever questions that may have arisen, and maybe we can discuss some of the questions that certainly I have tried to arouse throughout this presentation.
Dr. Lynch? you gave us a mouthful here tonight. Had a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Are there any tests for atrazine? Checking atrazine levels?
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, you would have to use specialized laboratories to do that. Of course, I get my blood from LabCorp or Quest, and it would be very wonderful if they did, but you may have to go to some of the specialty laboratories or the research labs. But while I was doing integrative medicine, I was able to find laboratories, like there was one called Great Smokies. There's several out there that will offer that type of testing. And they should. We should be gathering that type of data, especially when we're talking about hormone-related cancers. That's how I'm thinking about it. We should be thinking from a precautionary point of view. But Dr. Lewis, I recognize from having practiced for years that if the insurance company does not respect your thinking, they may not want to pay for the test. So it may leave the cost to the patient in some circumstances. But if we just continue to follow the standard protocol of operation, we're not really going to be able to advance medical care in the way that we ought to. More of our physicians need to know about environmental medicine. And this information that I'm giving you is basically at least 20 years old. Nothing here that I have said is recent, brand new information.
One other comment.
Yes,
it
sir.
appears that estrogen is probably the sort of a common denominator for causing a lot of these diseases. And we do know that, for example, in chickens, a lot of these animals are given hormones as well as antibiotics. And also in some of the milk, I know in Puerto Rico, they found high levels of estrogen, and we saw girls who developed precocious puberty. So there seems to be some relationship, definitely, with the endocrinologic changes when young people are exposed to high levels of estrogen. Now, the other question I have in men is atrazine directly working on the conversion of testosterone to estrogen, or is it working, let's say, centrally on the pituitary gland?
That's a great question. I'll answer the first one, the last part first. Atrazine is inducing or stimulating atrazine, which is causing the testosterone to be converted to estrogen. Some of you know that weightlifters may also use testosterone, but if they don't use an aromatase inhibitor like anastrozole, that testosterone can be converted into estrogen. When the estrogen is produced, that estrogen or estradiol or estrone, because there's actually 3 different forms of estrogen: estradiol, estrone, and estriol. It begins then to go to the pituitary gland, and it affects luteinizing hormone. That luteinizing hormone will then inhibit the production of testosterone. And so some of what I have uncovered suggests that the lack of testosterone may be as important to the picture of prostate cancer. Now, your earlier point, many of these endocrine disrupting chemicals, I don't know if there was a collaboration with the devil and the chemical companies. I don't know. But many of them seem to focus on that step, that aromatase enzyme. And so it binds to the receptor and it blocks normal function, or it stimulates it in some kind of way. But it would be, I'm not trying to be gender proper, but it seems as though many of our men are somehow shifting towards this estrogenic direction. okay? So we have got to find ways, natural ways of blocking it. But the more important thing that we need to do, and how do we do this? How do we stand up to the chemical companies? Tyrone said that he actually showed the Environmental Protection Agency that how he was able to feminize frogs, and the EPA, our protection, didn't do a thing. So who's really protecting us? I don't know. I don't know. So as I said, you may not want to get political, but unless your voice is heard, unless you understand the dynamics of what I just showed you, we are moving fast in a world that we're not going to recognize in another 10 years.
I do have a question. I work as a naturopath, and one outcome of seeing estrogen levels rise and testosterone levels falls is heart problems and strokes and heart attacks, because the thing that stops that excessive clotting is made from testosterone. So the TPA that's naturally made is coming out of that. And I know you were focused on cancer because that's the biggest boogie monster, but a lot of people I'm seeing having heart problems, strokes, all of that as a direct correlation with low testosterone and other things such as that. I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, there is something magical about testosterone as far as I'm concerned. And I think that most of us probably have heard in some form or fashion that estrogen has, and some of the hormone replacement kinds of treatments that women have used over the years have also been strongly associated with blood clots. So there may very well be factors. I can't say that I'm an expert on them, but thankfully you are here and you are able to share with us some of the truths that you have seen. So there may be some capacity that testosterone has. It's a little bit tricky because when a person has high levels of testosterone, their hemoglobin levels will actually go up. Have you noticed that? They'll have higher levels of hemoglobin the higher the testosterone, but it still may be able to prevent clotting issues. And I think that it's not a bad idea these days for men over 50 to be checking in with their physician. And just like you would get your hemoglobin A1C or your cholesterol or your blood sugar or your kidney function, we need to start asking about our estrogen levels, testosterone levels, and the free testosterone levels. Those things are always included in my annual or semi-annual blood test because I want to know. And if I need to do something about it, my physician will be able to handle that. Thank you so much for that question. I know there are more questions. I threw some things at you that were designed to provoke you. What are your thoughts?
Dr. Lynch, there's a question here. What type of tests do we request for levels of our system, and how likely will insurance approve them? I know you've answered the second question.
Yeah, there are more specialized labs. I have to say that nowadays, different from 10 years ago even, you can actually contact certain independent laboratories and pretty much write down the kinds of things that you want. Now, the provision is that you may have to pay, but those tests are available. And if you inquire about categorically endocrine disrupting chemicals, you will find out in your communities what kinds of things that you need to be concerned about. But if you get to the right labs, they may do a full battery of things, and it just wouldn't be a bad idea to know. But they're going to be expensive tests if your insurance company is not going to contribute anything to that. It's just that, I mean, what I presented to you as Dr. Lewis had indicated came from this past semester. I was in graduate school at the University of Florida, and I'll give you a quick story. Back in the 1940s, during World War II, the country had to figure out how they were going to feed the military. So they selected Lake Apopka, which is here in Central Florida, to grow food. So farmers came in, they brought pesticides, herbicides, levees, and pumps, and all the stuff, but they also brought nitrates. And before you knew it, the lakes were poisoned, the fish were dying, the birds eating the fish were dying, and that entire ecology just really suffered. And that is a microcosm of what is happening around the country. Lots of the water supplies are being contaminated with industry, through industry, and they're able to pretty much keep things under the down low. You don't know that. That's why I'm encouraging everyone here to know something about the source of drinking water, so you can get a readout. What's in the water? And when they tell you, oh, we have small amounts of this and small amounts of that, don't go for it. Because in this new world of science, even small amounts very small amounts can be hazardous. And here's one example. Can you imagine a dropper full, something that you would just use to get maybe 1 cc of something, a dropper full of something. Can you imagine if you put 1 dropper full of that in an Olympic-sized pool, and yet that amount that you just dropped in one pool is measurable and can stimulate and affect hormone systems. But wait, there's more. Because can you imagine 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools, 20 of them, with one dropper, and that's still too toxic. Some of these chemicals are that toxic. 1 dropper full, 20 Olympic-sized pools. So when they tell you, oh, it's just a small amount, no, it's not acceptable ideally. But heck, we're on planet Earth, and that's why I say, if it wasn't for the goodness of God, if it wasn't that He gave us something to fight back, He gave us an immune system that was somewhat compatible. And I don't know if it's because it goes along with prayer and meditation. I don't know if it's that, trusting in Him. But if it wasn't for His mercy, all of us would be coming down with something. That's how ubiquitous you can turn to the left and to the right, and it's another poison. You get my drift? So I'm not trying to be a killjoy, just trying to give the reality. But within that reality, I'm also thanking God that He has protected us. But it's not everybody that has that protection. So we're going to have our friends that are suffering, and we cannot blame them. We have got to get away from a blaming mentality, blame the victim, because sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes chemicals are causing difficulty in losing weight, for example. They got brain fog, and we're very good at blaming the victim. We got to pray for them, and we've got to direct them towards the 5th dimension. We got to get Dale's philosophy on them, and really we still have to share the New Start message. We still have to do the best that we can, but things are really rough for us, and we've got to see this earth as one unit.
Yes, well, thank you so very much, Dr. Lynch. This was an amazing and so thorough a presentation. We are right up against our time, and I know if anyone has questions, we'd like to be respectful of the time constraints that we've set up. And so we will have a closing prayer, but feel free to stay on. For those of you, Dr. Danny, you want to just let us know a little bit more about what we're going to be doing, and then we'll get our closing prayer.
Oh yeah, simply put, I don't know if some of you remember that TV show with Tim the Toolman Taylor, right? Every once in a while, there's a scene where he goes to his backyard and talk to his friend Wilson. We want to have just a chat, for a few minutes on how you have experienced what you're going through, And this is an opportunity for us to speak freely. We've heard the presentation, a beautiful presentation from Dr. Lynch. But when the rubber meets the road, how do you feel? What are you thinking? What are your fears? What are your concerns? We don't want to take up time. We also just want to get to know you, right? Natural health enthusiasts. We want to get to know you on a more personal level. Maybe your sibling, your mother, your father. So that's why we have just a few minutes for backyard conversation.
Okay, so if we could have our closing prayer. Maria, thank you so very much. I saw that your hand was up, and so feel free to stay back to ask the question that you had.
Okay. Did you want me to pray too?
Yes, please. Yeah, you could pray to close this out. Yes.
Yes.
I want to thank everyone for coming.
Okay, thank you very much. Our Father, which art in heaven, thank you so much for this instructional period of time. It is amazing what we go through in our daily lives. Thank you for the learning. It's important that we continue our education even as we get younger by the years. And Lord, thank you for these wonderful speakers. And bless those that have to leave, and take care of us each and every day, and hope that everything that we have seen here, we take to practice. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Dr.
Yeah, Barry, you
I had a question, and my
time
question
for the
was,
closing video, or?
yes, if you don't mind sharing the closing video, Barry, and then we'll go right to our backyard conversation.
okay.
We're thrilled that you're attending this edition of your Natural Health Meetup. In between our monthly sessions, you can stay connected with us in as many as 3 easy ways. Our Facebook group has our live as well as archived videos along with other natural health updates and a place to post your questions. Our Natural Health Learn and Share Meetup site has announcements, reminders, and messages for you, and also our confidential requests for prayer page. We love to pray for you and any concerns of life that you may have. Use the link on the screen to stay connected for any one of these or all 3.